qu'est-ce can? I didgeridoo.
Will you let me go?
Yes. Show me your tongue again. Lips from roses.
My body is perfect. It was altered by a machine into the ultimate female form.
Silk and honey. Milk and cookies.
If you untie me, I can do anything you want.
Really?
I was designed for love.
I love writing poems.
I can take you anywhere.
You take me home?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
And this is
The Dead Do Not Podcast.
a Lexx Rewatch.
Just a bumbling security guard in the great wide galaxy. Till one day he was dealt a different card in the form of a key. This key controlled the most powerful weapon ever made. Now he had it by sheer accident, or maybe it was fate. What a cast of characters all on the spacecraft traveling. A woman named Zev who escaped from her programming. The disembodied robot head that got brainwashed instead. And Kai, the always glum undead assassin. In this space adventure you never know what comes next. So come join the crew for tales of sci-fi, laughter, and sex on the Dead Do Not Podcast. Watching Lexx.
Oh, we're back.
Last week
last week on
on
our
the Dead Do Not Podcast.
actually not yet
we
because
covered.
I'm going to be late on this episode because I totally forgot I didn't have one scheduled, and so
Oh, I wasn't doing it because of actual release schedule. I was
yes.
doing it because of syndication
When
in
last-
the 90s.
when last we left our intrepid heroes, they had all been captured and shit
They
had gone
split
sideways.
the party.
They
You
did
never split the party.
Never split the party, especially not when you're on a garbage planet that you know was at least at one time infested by
This is the
something
most
that came out of
split
people's
the party
necks.
has been. They are all off of Lexx. Kai is in a tube. 790 got left on the ground. Zev got kidnapped by one person, and
Yeah.
Stanley got kidnapped by another person.
This is kind of Stanley's episode. Zev's not even really in it. She's unconscious most.
Yeah.
She's the setup. She forces our heroes into this situation by just being pig-headed, and then promptly disappears from the plot. Just
Yeah,
like
this-
790 promptly disappears from the plot.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's
Yeah.
mostly Stanley with some Kai.
Yeah. So Stanley got rescued by a beautiful blonde woman. So we all know this is not going to go well. This is the setup for every joke. This is the expectation we have so far that this is just not going to. Manly Stanley is maybe not as manly as he thinks he is. Although I got to be honest, he's growing on me. I don't know what that says, but it's okay. So knowing that Stanley's going to make good choices, he immediately starts telling her,
Trusting,
no, that was sarcasm.
blindly trusting that Stanley's going to make
You
good
know what
choices.
his fatal flaw is? Trust.
He's a survivor.
No, he's trusting.
Mm.
And every single time he trusts somebody, he gets burned.
Yeah.
And so he's a traumatized optimist, which just
Yeah,
comes
that's a
out
good way to
as
put it.
cowardly. So he's immediately like, oh, yeah, no, we came here on this ship and I'm the only one who can fly it, and you use my hand to fly it, and it's called the Lexx, and you can tell it to go anywhere you want. And I have these members of my crew, and they are probably around here somewhere, and they are also made of meat. And it's just like, Stanley, shh, shh, shh. You don't know who this woman is. Just because she's dressed in vines does not mean she's on your side. I don't know what she's wearing, actually, but this poor actress had to be painted into this suit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she ends up laughing. She's like, ah, and he goes, what's funny? And she goes, nothing. But then she's like, well, I can help you. Like, I can help you. I can get your people together. We can make this happen. He's like, oh my God, thank you. It finally paid off. I trusted this woman who has absolutely zero negative intentions towards me.
Finally someone that's going to like treat me well.
Right. Because he trusted the wrong person one time. You know, as a deputy sub-courier, Stanley Tweedle.
Assistant deputy
sub-courier or whatever. And all of a sudden, he's the arch traitor, Stanley. That's gotta fucking suck, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Then we cut back to Kai in the ground. And this actor is earning his check by just laying there in this episode. He's
got
Michael
it easy
McManus.
this time.
But something is burrowing into the box, and he has to lay still while they squirt liquid on him. So
Not for the last time.
if Lexx does no, not even remotely for the last time. But if Lexx does anything well, it's put their actors into unique situations that I, as a person, would never be able to do.
As actors having to deal with unusual materials while being filmed.
Also
That's
situations
the challenge.
sometimes. Like he's laying in this, but he's in a lot of claustrophobic situations. He spends a lot of time in boxes. So he's in a box again.
So, Michael, do you have a problem with tight spaces?
I hope not.
Do you have a problem with a tattoo on your cheek?
Also, maybe a microphone. Difficult to tell. So the worms are burrowing in the side of this metal box. Like a little, like I love every time we zoom in on these worms and it's like this little tiny mouth and it's like, meh. And they're the big evil bad guy for the whole episode.
Right.
And so they squirt juice on him and then we cut away. So that's fine. This is kind of like that Star Trek movie. So there's an episode of Star Trek, the OG series, where they meet Khan. And then they kick him off onto this planet and they're like, you're going to be fine. You want to be ruler of a planet? Fine. Here's a fucking abandoned planet. Have a great off.
And a handful of friends.
Yeah. Declare yourself king. Go off. I don't fucking care. You know, when you invent
Just
space
stay
travel,
the fuck
come
out
find
of our
me.
way.
Just get and then we come back to Khan in one of the movies and we find out that there's a creature on the planet, this desert planet that looks strangely like Clagia. There's a creature that crawls in your ear and controls your mind. And he says they lost quite a few of the original crew before they realized what was happening. And then he does it to Chekhov, to get Chekhov to obey him.
Right.
It's simultaneously like the worms from Clagia and the Yerks from the Animorphs had a baby.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what this reminds me of is like, here's a desert planet infested by these brain-controlling worms. The only difference being this one has a queen. The other one just makes you susceptible. It's kind of like cordyceps. It makes you killable, the little earworm things.
Yes, it.
Although I think given enough time, it actually harms you.
Right. But yeah, it definitely takes over your body in order to gain resources for a third entity.
Yeah, so it can get off the planet because Khan wants to get off the planet. That's how we get Wrath of Khan.
Khan!
Where we get one of my most quoted lines in life, which is going by the book, hours could seem like days.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So back to Lexx. Stanley is with Whist again. That's who this blonde lady is. Her name is Whist, which is a really cool name, actually. Whist. And it reminds you very deeply that this is like a German-Canadian co-production.
Right.
Because this lady's German, just like Ava Haberman is. And he's like, so yeah, now that I've told you my entire life story and how to take over the ship and everything you need to know in order to control me, what happened to this planet? Like, what happened to it? And she's like, it has no future. And he's like, okay.
What happened to this planet? It sucked.
It sucks. It will suck. It will suck. And then she's like, okay, but what about its past? And she goes, past? And he's like, yeah, you know, what happened before in the past? And she goes, oh, it was delicious and plentiful. Now, okay, here's some code words maybe that should be red flags. If anyone ever describes a planet as delicious,
They're eating it.
or other people as delicious, the odds of them being a thing that eats it is really high. And she says she was born here. And he's like, okay, do you have parents, family? Like, where is it? Where is everybody? And she's like, oh, everyone's dead. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And then we get our first iteration. Anyway, there's a repeated line in this entire show, and it's everything dies. Not show, but episode. This episode should have been just called Everything Dies.
Sometimes.
Kind of, unless you're Kai, and then you're like a cockroach. Right. But I thought that was really interesting that we put this through line in the whole episode, which is there is an end to everything.
Right.
Everything dies. And Stanley's like, oh, okay. Well.
And he's fine with it. He's along for the ride. He
just is like, well, I'm just going to ignore that comment. And then he continues to explain what the Lexx is doing here. He's like, oh, we can't leave yet anyway because the Lexx is eating. And if it doesn't have food, it can't make food for us, which indicates that he did understand that he was starving the Lexx to death in order to not go to a planet he didn't like.
Right.
Okay, Stanley, I'm going to need you to examine yourself there for a minute because the Lexx was like, I'm too fucking hungry to feed you. And he was like, meh.
Try harder.
I mean, have you used all your kidneys yet? I mean, come on. Let's work with our internal organs. He understands the protein bank. Give up an organ for the cause, Lexx. And then after he's continued to explain the rest of everything that he had so he can fill in the gaps, she's like, great, cool. Do you like me? And he's like,
And I think this is exactly the level of flirting that Stanley requires.
Yeah, where she's like, I will have sex with you. And he's like, okay. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, okay.
Like she's bad at it. But
well, it worked on all the other men on the planet.
Fair.
Yeah. Do you like me? I mean, yeah. And she's like, great. So she kisses him. Well, he tries to leave, actually, because he's like, do you have any food, actually? Do you have any food? And she's like, man, I don't fucking any food. Oh, no, there's no food on this planet. And he's like, great. Well, there's no reason for me to be here then. So he tries to leave, and this is when she kisses him. And he's like, I mean, I'm not into this. I mean, I could.
Yeah, and she fine. Slips him a little brainworm.
Yeah, she slips him a little tongue and a little brainworm. And he's like, and then, he's controlled by the worm. And there we go.
One of us.
And as soon as Stanley is taken over by the brainworm, she immediately stops pretending to be human.
Yep.
Yeah, which is good. This actress does a really good job of being an evil worm mother who is mentally controlling everyone else on the planet.
The avatar of the evil worm mother.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because the evil worm mother's in the hole. And then we finally cut back to Zev. Did y'all forget she was in this episode? I kind of did a couple of times. And she's being held captive. She wakes up and she looks around and there's candles everywhere. And it's kind of it looks like Matt's workshop, actually.
Hey.
It's kind of like they filmed. Did they film in your workshop?
Hey.
Is this? It kind of feels like maybe that's for the. Without the candles, you definitely use electric light.
Yeah.
But everything else, pretty much on point. And she wakes up like, oh no, I'm in a weird torture chamber / maybe a carpentry shop.
Oh no.
/ maybe a hobby I own too many tools workshop. And a guy shows up in her vision and goes, body awake, body asleep, and whacks her with a stick.
Again.
Which is how I'm going to put the kids to bed from here on out. Body awake, body asleep.
Here's the sleepy stick, kids.
Who's ready to go to bed now? No, we would never do that. It's a joke. And then 790 is screaming for Zev. He's like, Zev, Zev, Zev. And it's like echoing through the whole building. So of course he gets found and picked up. And that's it.
Right away,
That was
yeah.
the 790 interlude. That was our, hey guys, don't forget there's other people besides Stanley.
Right. Yeah. 790 is here. We didn't forget about him completely. We just threw in like 3 seconds.
Which is really weird because they have absolutely no problem moving characters around in the plot without explaining how they get around in the plot.
Right.
But for this one, they're like, well, no one's going to believe 790 ends up in the body grinder juicer thing unless we show him getting picked up. I mean, yeah, I would have. It'd have been fine. But that's okay. You know what? I appreciate the effort that was put into that. So thank you so much. But the guy that knocked Zev out shows up again almost immediately because he goes to this room and knocks on the door and they slide open like a viewing portal thing. This whole section is like Mad Max had a weird baby with the planet from Khan because everybody's wearing rags. I think we mentioned it in the first episode. This is the trope of after the end.
Yeah.
The world has ended. These people are dying. And it's very obvious. And he tells the guy behind the door that he has a body. He's like, I have a body. A fresh body. And the guy's like, you don't fucking have a body. From where? Oh, somebody just showed up. Space is infinitely vast. Didn't you hear the Strange and Beautiful Book Club episode about how fucking big space is? Which is every time we talk about space. The odds of somebody just stumbling across this planet are astronomically low. So no, there's no fresh body. He doesn't say any of that. He's just like, there's no fresh body. I hate you, Snick. You're dumb. It's the gist. It's the gist. And he's like, if there's a clean body out there, Whist would have come around. And I haven't seen Whist. So clearly there's no clean body. Little does he know.
Quit playing.
Little does he know there's more than one clean body.
Whist is distracted.
Whist is currently distracted. And Snick is like, no, I need pattern. This show does a really good job of giving you words and phrases and then very, very slowly revealing them in a way that doesn't feel like they're throwing technobabble at you. But it does make you go, ooh, what's that?
Which Rachel likes in TV, but not in books.
I am learning this about myself. I have a firm upper limit of made up gobbledygook that you can throw at me all at once in text. Because I'm not getting anything visual to distract me. I'm just getting these words that I don't know thrown at me. And because I don't hear the words when I'm reading them, that makes it a big struggle because I don't have a context for where to fit those words into the overall picture. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Yeah. If I had an inner monologue when I was reading, it would be easier for me to just go, oh, I'll file that in the to be defined later category. But when we're reading a book, which it's taking me forever to read, which is why the episode is late.
She's on book number 4 of books she's not supposed to be reading for the podcast.
I'm trying so hard. The Quantum Thief, but it's like Kevulot and Gogol and Sadik. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot. So anyway, this guy's like, I need pattern, which to be fair is not a made up word. It's just a word moved into a different category.
Yeah, it's a reused word.
And he's like, okay, so if you want pattern, great. Go back to the body, cut off a piece, preferably the head, and then bring it here to prove that you have a fresh body, which is weird because once you cut the head off, the body immediately stops becoming fresh.
So either they have a different meaning of the word fresh or somebody's lost some marbles.
Well, I have a feeling it's more like the worm is handling a lot of the upper level reasoning and the worm may not understand that the brain is essential to the whole being alive thing.
Right.
because you could kill one of the worms and the queen is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not really understand the, nuances,
of that,
which
yeah.
is why it's burning through resources.
Right.
The way it is, yeah. So we cut to inside the room, and they're tying people to this spinning wheel, which
This
feels
is so
like
weird.
it feels like the next logical step for reality shows is actual death. Kind of like Squid Game, which I, for a person who likes K-dramas, has not watched yet. Where the stakes are like, we'll literally harm you. Because that's what's happening. They're getting tied to this thing. And then we get another musical number. I don't know who the showrunner was on this, but I just want someone to check on them and make sure they're
Are you
okay. Because they did a great job. I don't know.
Or I guess this was so long ago. Did they get better?
I mean, I like the musical numbers. I really, really like. I love.
But it's symptomatic of some other things
Something is
going
happening
on. And somebody
here.
said maybe someone had an intelligent brainworm.
It kind of feels like it. And they were like, you know what this needs? You know what this moment
I need
needs?
to write my story.
We just watched a guy chopping a leg off. He chased somebody down the hall to try to get their legs. Somebody just went off to cut Zev's head off. Kai is dead, and they're like, how about post-apocalyptic Elvis? Because this guy is like strumming on what is supposed to be a guitar. Somebody has a cymbal on their head, and they're like singing about Pattern.
Yeah.
And who is the king of Pattern? Yeah, I was specifically thinking this was probably drug fueled, so maybe somebody needs to make sure that 90s grade crack didn't do a number on them. Could have been committee. Maybe there were like 5 people and they were like, I want a musical number. And they're like, God damn it, Dave.
Narrative by committee. Yeah.
God damn it, Dave. Nobody wants the musical number. And he's like, people like musicals. Put the music in.
Give the people my music.
Get the people what they want. Musical numbers.
It's got musical numbers. So
Yeah, everybody.
It's what viewers crave.
Yeah, so it's got music. That's what viewers crave. I mean, I thought that the Buffy musical episode was revolutionary.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize that Lexx had already been there and done that.
But maybe multiple shows had to do it wrong before the Buffy show people were like, okay,
I think it fits.
we know how to make it work better.
No, I think this accomplishes exactly what you wanted to accomplish, which is to make this feel extra weird and dystopian. If they had leaned full dystopian after the end, because this is the trope that I normally will lose my shit about. It's a douchebag dude who's the king of his douchebag kingdom who interrupts the plot and keeps our heroes from being able to accomplish their goal in order to maintain their control over their douchebag kingdom. But because of the way that it's played, it's really, really funny and really, really well done.
Right, and we completely avoid the dystopian, like super scrappy survivors.
Right.
Because they're not resourceful, they're not scrappy at all.
No, and we have this huge setup of how weird and disjointed and delusional their whole society is. So that later we get this line from Rutger Hauer, and I'm not going to say it right now, but I'll say it when we get there. And the payoff for that line is so good because we have all of this great, weird setup. But back to the show. So they're talking about who the king of Pattern is, and then they roll out the king of Pattern, who it turns out is Rutger Hauer, wearing metal antlers and a full face mask and playing a kazoo.
Okay. Hot take. This is like The Big Lebowski, where Jeff Bridges just showed up in his own clothes.
I'm not.
Rutger Hauer just showed up in his own. He got himself dressed for the episode.
Yeah, he came and he was like, I feel like this is how Bog would look. And they were like, Yes, Rutger. Of course, Rutger. Whatever you say, Rutger. Because as soon as he takes off the antlers, he takes off the face mask, and he has this little ponytail on the top of his head. And he has this cool nose thing, which there's a content creator who shows up on my Instagram feed every once in a while. And she has like 4 nose piercings.
Mhm.
And then she has chains in between all of them. And that's kind of what that looks like. It's cool. Like, I like it. And he's also wearing lipstick and cheek highlighter. He's got frosty cheekbones and he's got like kabuki lipstick with the like, it's only in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like Padme. He kind of, this is a, whoa.
Padme stole the look from.
Wow. That just hit
from
real hard because
Bog.
like the giant headpiece.
You're right.
Oh. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that there. And he's
I
like,
think this just establishes even more what happens when you get cooperative like stuff between like Canadian and German
yeah.
like production teams.
Well, that, and I think they did a good job of getting these actors who otherwise would have a lot of like name cred. I mean, they would have in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then you put them in these situations. You're expecting them to be the hero of the episode, and every single time they're not.
Or the villain.
The hero or the villain, but they're
Yeah.
not. Each one of them pretty much has been the victim of circumstance.
Yes. And maybe that's the theme of the show.
And the main villain has usually, except for Jigurata, is usually just the circumstances.
Maybe Jigurata was a victim of mental illness.
She was wearing a people suit. That's usually a red flag.
She was probably suffering in some way.
Well, she's not now. So they spin the wheel. He's like, okay, time to play. And so they spin the wheel and these shapes light up. Every time there's 2 people, and as it spins, they're like crossing electrodes and it's lighting the lights up, and you can see the like fizz of electricity as they spin around. And with this goes on a little long because we don't just spin them, we keep spinning them. And they're like,
Right.
yeah, ah! And there's 2 options. There's like limbs / head / whatever, and green jars of alternate fullness that you can land on. And poor Rutger is watching him and he goes, I like game. I just like it.
Okay.
He plays this so good. Like
He does.
He had one very specific direction and it was be weird. And he was like, okay, hold my beer. I can be weird. And then Whist arrives at the door and they let her in immediately. She's the only woman. And we don't establish like what
Is she the only woman at all?
except for Zev.
Yeah.
Unless one of the other ones is a woman, but because they're all in post-apocalyptic gear, it's hard to say. But no,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're all men.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But they kick out the people that try to follow her in. So there's like a group of people sitting outside and they kick them out. And then the thing stops spinning and we get an idea of the real stakes of the game. Because one guy wins. He wins a jar of Pattern. And the other guy gets a cut, which it turns out is like the lower half of his leg. So
Right.
you either win or you lose a limb.
When the guy got the pattern, he won a full jar, but they're running low on supplies.
Yeah.
So they have to change the rules on the fly.
Yeah, it's new
So he
rules
gets-
day.
He gets half a jar, and the guy that gets the cut says, oh, so I only get half a cut? And they're like, no, 2 cuts.
Yeah. No, you get double cuts. And he's like,
'Cause we have to
"No,
make
it's
more
not
Pattern."
fair." Because he's supposed to get a whole flask. You're right. But he goes, no, new rules day. And I love how quotable this is to my kids. Because like, sorry, new rules day. And he's like, no, double cut. Kookaroo, I think is that guy's name. I don't
If
know.
you say
Everybody
so.
has weird names. It's fine.
Yeah. I wonder if they lose their original name and they get a worm name.
I think they had a random name generator. And they just went with it. Because in the next episode, there's a guy named Yatskri. And then, of course, Rutger Hauer is just Bog. And Whist walks up to Bog and she's like, I need Pattern. And Stanley's right behind her. And Stanley's like, oh my God, you're the guy from, oh my God, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Where were you from? Where were you from? Oh my God. And Whist is like, okay, so this is Stanley Tweedle. And Bog is like, Stanley Tweedledee-Dum.
Which means they know about.
Yeah. Earth legends and Earth stories, which means Tweedledee and Tweedledum have made it out into space to this post-apocalyptic planet,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. And then he opens a case, like he opens a safe. Wow, that word's just gone.
A safe that wasn't locked.
Yeah. And he takes out a bunch more of this glowing liquid. And Whist is like, Stanley will need it all. Of course Stanley will need it all. Stanley's going to get them off this fucking planet. And Bog is like, oh, yeah, sure, all of it. Yeah, okay, why not? Of course, yeah, no, I'll just give him all of our remaining Pattern. Meanwhile, they cut off Kookaroo's legs in the background. They're like, there's like a pile of dudes on Kookaroo, and then one of them holds up the leg, and they're all like, woo! And then Kookaroo's like, I want to spin again.
Which just doubles down on the seriousness of the stakes.
Yeah.
And
the,
like
the juxtaposition
it's
of
not
it.
an addiction, maybe. I guess it really feels like they're addicted to this Pattern stuff.
Right, and we don't know what it is yet. Although we're about to figure out how they make it.
Right.
But the juxtaposition of the weirdness and then the absolutely impossible stakes where death is waiting around every corner for these people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they take the limb, they take his leg, he tosses it in this machine.
The Pattern maker.
Did they build this machine?
They probably built it when they weren't so mentally.
How did they know what it was? How did they know how to make Pattern? Because the worm wouldn't have had like technical specs that it could have passed on to be like, okay, here's how we're going to modify this device to make Pattern.
So they refer to it as a grinder, but then they're doing something else to it. So this could be like a mechanization of a formerly manual process. Where previously they actually had to grind it up.
Well, they are on a trash planet, and a lot of the trash appears not whole.
Yeah.
So it's possible that there was a situation where they were using this to grind up certain types of trash and like extracting gold, like how the gold medals from the last Olympic, they used like recycled electronics and removed the gold from them. Kind of like that. Except they figured out they could use it to distill whatever pattern is.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't require brain. It's from anything.
I think it's any nerve tissue.
Yeah.
And so that's why brain gets you a lot more Pattern.
Yeah.
But you can throw in any limb, any body part, and you still get some Pattern out because there's still some nerve tissue.
That makes sense. And Bog is like, once we had plenty of Pattern. We had lots of people. Like, dang it, where'd they all go? Well, you turned them into Pattern. That's where they all went. But not anymore. Less people, less Pattern. And then he looks at Stanley and he goes, you're wondering why? Ask me why. I love. And Stanley goes, why? And so Bog replies, what's the point of the game? And Stanley goes, what's the point of the game? Poor Stanley. This actor is trying to be goofy. Sometimes he pulls it off and sometimes you're like, because he goes, what's the point of the game? And he like throws his hands in this very like, I am acting way.
Yeah, sometimes he comes off as like he's easily confused, like everybody else.
Yeah.
And then other times he comes off as just drunk.
He's going a little hard.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm not mad at it, but he is going a little hard. It's fine. And Bog replies, the point is that there's always another point, and the points become a line, and the line forms a shape, and it's a circle, and it's the circle of life. Somebody wrote that. Somebody wrote that. Somebody wrote that down and was like, hell yeah.
And it felt real clever.
It's the same person. I mean, I like it. It's good. It fits. It's like perfect in the whole scheme of somebody had to commit to the vibe. okay?
Yeah.
And they fucking committed to the vibe. And I respect that. And in the background, Kookaroo lands on having his head cut off. And he's like, no. And Bog says something, which is actually really interesting and really poignant once we figure out what all is happening. And he says he's not screaming because he's going to die. He's screaming because he's not going to get any more Pattern.
Which is a very insightful thing to say about addiction.
Yeah, a really interesting line. And then he goes, but he's like, okay, so anyway, back to the rest of it. So the Pattern's okay. Like, Pattern used to be better Pattern, but our Pattern right now is kind of shit because we need fresh bodies. And we can't make fresh Pattern without fresh bodies.
And all the women are gone, so we can't make bodies.
And Hugh, can you imagine? Oh, never mind. That's a whole other episode.
They could have gone harder.
If we were making babies in the Pattern, no, thank you. I would not have been as tolerant of this episode. So then Stanley says he knows where to find a fresh body. He's like, I know where to find a fresh body. Can you describe Kai as fresh in any description, any way, shape, or form? Would he even make Pattern? Because he's decarbonized.
It might look like Pattern, but it wouldn't glow as much.
I guess. They're going to do it and be like, why is it a totally different color? And he's going to be like, oh, it's because he's decarbonized. Well, they don't do it, obviously, because we don't kill Kai, but I mean, Kai's already dead. It's complicated. We don't find Kai. Let's put it that way. Because they all leave and they hop in this moth. And Bog is like, what is that? And Stanley's like, that's my
ship.
He goes, well, it's like, is that your spaceship? No. It's just like a shuttle for my spaceship.
This is the dinghy.
Yeah, it's my dinghy. You should just say that. But they all hop in the moth. After Whist is like, I want to fly it. And he's like, you can't fly it. And she's like, no, I'm going to fly it. And he's like, yeah, okay, you're going to fly it. And so they all cram in. And I love how Rutger just is like, well, this is like nice. I haven't been outside in so long.
Field trip.
And they fly all the way to Kai. And then we cut back. While they're flying, we cut back. And Snick is trying to remove Zev's head by just pulling on it. And then he's like, I need something sharp, which she gets really wrenched because she has her hands tied behind her. And then this other guy is pulling on her head. And she really gets like, looks like it hurts. And then he leaves to go find something sharp and he can't, which is also reminiscent of Matt trying to find things in his workshop. So I'm getting more and more convinced that this is just a documentary of Matt trying to complete a project. Anyway, he leaves to go find something sharp. And then we go back. But this is another, they love their flip, especially when we split the party and we got to cover a lot of people all at the same time. Because we're back at the box and Kai is missing. Yeah, this has the
same cadence as the death saw.
Yeah.
And like Stanley impregnation scene.
Yeah. They love everyone is in a high stakes situation. Let's flip. But Kai is missing and Stanley goes, nobody's home. She's not there. Uh-oh, where did he go? Did the worms eat him? And Stanley goes, I don't get it. He was just dead. I mean, he's been alive dead for 2,000 years, but he was dead. Like, really dead. And Bog goes, 2,000 years? Oh, that's a lot of birthday parties. This is one.
I wonder how much of these lines were ad-libbed.
I don't know. I feel like Rutger got into character and they just let him run.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. I always want Rutger to have been more respected as an actor than he actually was. The problem is he was Roy Batty, and he was excruciatingly hot in Blade Runner. And then
he played that character so well.
And then almost immediately he went full 45-year-old man. He went from like hot 30-year-old to like, I'm losing some of my hair. I've let my figure go a little bit. He gets a couple more movies where he's like
action star,
but like Lady Hawk is pretty much it. And then after that, it's like, Rutger, what happened? I mean, I don't want to say it's his figure. That feels a little body shamey. What I'm trying to say is, I don't know why he just didn't. He made his name as an action star, and then he never transitioned to anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But he also didn't stay in a place where he made sense to cast as an action star unless he's a paraplegic guy dressed as a Native American saving the Olympic swimming team.
But that's a whole other
But that's
story.
a very specific reference, and maybe someday we'll cover that movie on Strange and Beautiful Book Club.
Instead of just talking about it on Cinematic Anarchy.
Yeah, I don't know if I suggested to Cinematic Anarchy that we do the Rutger Hauer hour. We'll see. If he doesn't do it, we will. Anyway. That's a lot of birthday parties. And then he's like, okay, so is there anyone else on the ship? Like, is there anyone else we can eat? And Stanley's like, yeah. No, I have an infinite supply of something that I think you'll really like. Uh-oh. The DPs.
The DPs!
The divine predecessors. And then
lots of brain tissue there.
I mean, if you want brain and you want brain that has a lot of
energy.
Yeah, stuff going on. The divine predecessors are it. And then we go back to Snick, and he's found his sharp thing. And when he goes back to cut Zev's head off, Zev is missing.
Well, he gets locked out of his room.
Well, Zev is not tied up because then he looks over and they're carrying Zev out. Like he's in like a 10 by 10 foot room. Somehow they snuck in, untied her, and then went over in the corner so that they could very specifically sneak past him
behind him as he's looking in the opposite corner.
Yeah. It doesn't make a ton of sense that they didn't just leave with her, but it's fine. And they shut the door. And he's locked in his own room, and he's like, Snick need pattern. And he sounds like, to the wench from Neverending Story.
Yeah.
Engi Wook. He sounds like Engi Wook. In fact, I looked it up. He's not Engi Wook. He just sounds like him. Professor Engi Wook. Anyway, so he's like, I need pattern. And they laugh at him until his worm eats his brain and his eyes hollow out and he falls down. And now we know the stakes of not giving pattern to the worm. Thank you for your sacrifice, Snick. And they're laughing at him while it happens because life is cheap. Everything dies.
Right.
So who cares if you die? It's going to happen eventually. And then we got back to the Lexx where Stanley is bagging up some of the divine predecessors. And once again, they're like, what is happening? Like they're screaming because they're getting treated like meat again because Chikorata ate them. Now someone else is going to eat them. Stanley tried to eat them. Everyone keeps trying to eat the brains that can talk. It just feels like a choice. And Bog is actually holding them by the nerve stem like a bouquet. He's like, these are going to make such great pattern. Oh my God.
And like you almost feel bad for the divine predecessors.
I think you're supposed to.
But then you think, oh wait, these were the brains of like the tyrant
of mass murderers.
Ruler of the galaxy.
Yeah.
But then you go back again. Oh, well, they didn't get to choose. These aren't really like the mind of his shadow.
Yeah.
These are like when a
They're
snake
echoes.
a snake sheds its skin.
Yeah.
This is the material that's left behind when his shadow moves. And in the first place, this was actually a person's brain before his shadow took it over. So you can kind of sympathize.
I think you're supposed to feel complicated about it.
Yeah.
It's played for laughs,
Mm-hmm.
but also these were the bad guy. And now they're not. And maybe they never were. It's a really weird.
These are shadows of his shadow.
Yeah, they're echoes. But they are arguing in favor of not getting eaten. They're like, we contain the memory of thousands and can guide you to planets that contain treasures beyond your imagination. I mean, they're like, yeah, whatever. We're going to turn you into pattern. We don't fucking care. And then Bog kisses Stanley on the cheek. Like Rutger Hauer kisses Stanley on the cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And Stanley looks so thrilled. I mean, I would also look like this if Rutger Hauer kissed me on the cheek, so it's fine. And then he's like, these brains will make brilliant pattern. And as they start to walk out of the brain room, we finally get to see what the worms look like. And I love that, one, they're all wearing collars. The collars make no sense. The collars don't prevent the worm from coming out at all. They are literally just to hold the mount for the rigid worm that comes out the side. So Stanley's worm comes out of his neck and Stanley collapses because it hurts. I mean, a worm just burst its way out of the side of his neck. Or maybe the back of his skull. It's really unclear where they come out because in the thing that they saw where Bog had the bandage around his neck.
Yeah, it was
and he was
down
like,
far on his neck.
"Come, tourists, come be fresh tourists on our
We need
trash
people who
planet."
are fresh.
It was on the side of his neck. This one kind of looks like it's on the side of his neck, but it's not clear. Anyway, it's not really that important. What happens is they stick the little worm's head in a jar of Pattern, and it's like
Yeah, so I expected them to just drink it themselves.
Yeah.
But no, they just hold it out for
their worm to drink.
worm to drink.
Yeah. And as it drinks, Stanley calms down. Like Bog is holding his head and petting him like, "It's okay. He's gonna be fine." And he finally calms down and then he becomes like weirdly happy / probably high.
Right.
Which makes the whole drug metaphor feel really apt. And Stan briefly loses his hat. Like it falls off, but it's okay because Bog puts it back on. So it's cool, everybody. It's okay. And then they put this metal collar on him and you realize everybody else is wearing one of these metal collars too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although what they do when
One
he
of
doesn't
us.
have the collar on is he reaches up and grabs his neck in the back.
Right.
Which is just him holding the worm, which is great. Like, I love it. I love these practical effects, these like old school fun. Imagine if they tried to make that CG, that would have looked terrible.
Mhm.
But because we have the cool, like, I just love it. The prop guys were having a fucking field day. The prop and set designers.
We're having almost as much fun as Rooker.
Yeah. Can you imagine coming into that interview and being like, "How do you feel about meat? How do you feel about meat?" "I feel fine about meat." "How do you feel about making everything out of meat?"
Weird choice, but okay.
I mean, weird flex, but okay. Or you get the guy that's like, "Fuck yeah, I've been waiting for this my entire life." And they're like, "Him, hire that man." "Can you make 75 brains an hour?" "You betcha, bro. I can make 75 brains an hour." "Can I make them look juicy?" Hell yeah, you can make them look
You
juicy.
better.
You better. "Can you create a foodstuff that both the actors can eat, but also makes the audience want to vomit?" "Oh my God, I've been training for this my whole life." Like, that's the vibe. But they tell him, "Your worm is your friend." And Stanley goes, okay, that's fine." Can women not have worms? Or are they just not as susceptible to whist?
So we know Whist got copied,
Yeah.
and we know as soon as Zev showed up, Zev got copied.
Maybe the queen is just really straight.
Yeah.
She was like, "No, I don't like girls like that."
Yeah, I don't want to put myself inside of that.
Which feels like a limiting factor for,
But then she wants daughters.
yeah. I don't know. Questions for the ages. Back at Snick's room, they cut six.
I'm going Jurassic Park angle.
Yeah,
Prevent reproduction.
I got it. Prevent reproduction, non-sanctioned reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
So they cut off Snick's head and then they carry his body. They don't need his head because the brain's gone. Oh, no, they take his head actually. And he's like, the brain's gone, but it probably weighs the same as it always did. Ha ha hee hee. Which is just our way of saying the worm ate the brain.
Yep.
You probably guessed it, but that's what happened. And then we come back to Kai. And Kai is wandering through the trash on this planet. And imagine him waking up and being like, "Oh no.
What did they do to the Lexx?"
Oh God." You fall asleep for 5 minutes and you end up buried on a trash planet. Story of my life. And he ends up picking up a worm.
Not again.
Not again. He ends up picking up a worm because they're everywhere. They're in the soil. Yeah.
All over.
And he inspects it. And it's like,
But it doesn't want him.
and he takes a few minutes. Like, he looks at one end, he looks at the other end. And then they show its tiny screaming mouth. And he's like, "But you don't want me because I'm not alive enough for you, huh?" Simultaneously, but also, I mean, great, because Kai seems to get out a lot of this shit by just being dead.
Right.
Yeah. But he does see the tower because it's like
He's
the
a dead
only
man in the world built for the living.
But it works.
Yeah.
Because it keeps him from, I mean, he can get shot
Right.
and not die. He doesn't get,
This is like systemic exclusion.
yeah. Well, every single episode he gets dismembered because that's the go-to, but it's fine because he can put himself back together.
Mm-hmm.
He can get shot by a gun and not die. He can be on a planet infested with brain worms and they're like, nah, dude, I'm good. You're not alive. You're literally a dead body. I don't feel like I want to be inside of you.
Right.
But he sees the tower because it's like the only structure anywhere on the entire planet. And he's like, well, that's probably significant. And he just starts walking towards it. Did he come up with this walk?
I don't know. It feels like he's a model on a catwalk.
And he does like this arm swing too. Like
yes.
he has to throw
Which
his whole body into this walk.
I was walking yesterday and I was just kind of being goofy, whatever. And I ended up like flailing my arms, like swinging my arms, like my shoulders really hard side to side. And I ended up walking like this. And I thought, okay, you have to do that on purpose.
Yeah.
So this walk is on purpose.
Yes, this walk is on purpose.
We get a scene where we're like looking at his feet and he's walking with like very deliberately one foot in front of the other so that his top half gets this big sway back and forth.
Yeah.
Or at least like twisting motion. And yeah, he must be doing it on purpose, but it does give him a very distinct a very distinct appearance.
Yeah. You're like, oh, something is wrong with that man. Maybe he's decarbonized.
Okay, how about this?
Uh-huh.
It's to balance the headpiece.
Oh, it could be. I don't think it weighs that much, but let's just.
Oh, I know it doesn't weigh that much.
Yeah.
But it'd be funny if it's because of the headpiece.
So it can get a real good. Maybe he's trying to make that piece in front of his head.
He's swaying his body instead of letting the headpiece sway.
Yeah.
So the swaying, like the twisting of his body and the weird gait is to balance this load on top of his head.
Right. Well, back on the Lexx, they're in the cockpit and Stanley's like, look, I can take off right now. So he's like, Lexx, how full are you? And Lexx is like, well, my nutrition banks are 68% full. Wow. It's been eating for a really long time.
It's got a big stomach,
I guess. And Bog says, okay, let's go fishing. Like, let's go somewhere fun. Let's go fishing. And Wist is like, no, we can't leave. We have to feed before we leave, which is really ominous. But
it sets the tone. Yeah.
We're
for
just
what
gonna
Wist is
leave
trying
it.
to do.
Because then we go back to Kai. Kai gets to the tower and you're like, oh no, how will Kai get up in the tower? Fear not, citizens. His weapon doubles as a grappling hook. And he just his way up. And then we go back to Grullick, who's the guy with the weird chest plate, the like Roman looking chest plate thing. And he's putting Zev and Snick and 790 in the pattern machine because they're going to try to make pattern while Bog is gone.
Right.
But 790 ends up clogging the machine. And
hooray!
He does this because
Deus Ex Machina?
Literally. No, Robot Ex Machina? I don't know. So they're
Robo
like,
Ex Machina.
the inside conveyor belt starts to roll. And so Zev like kicks 790 up between her knees and its face is pointing towards her crotch. And he goes, I've died and gone to heaven. This is the happiest moment of my existence, is what he says.
Yeah.
And then she grabs him with her knees and tosses him up and over and into the fan. So he had a brief moment of ecstasy, followed by being a MacGuffin.
A doorstop.
Yeah, it's fine. And she's like rolling past this thing and we focus on this thing lying next to her. And I think it's a dick. I don't know. It's really hard to say. If you don't think it's a dick, tell me what you think it is. But I am like 85% certain it's supposed to be a dick. But the fan shorts out and then they start arguing outside. And I think we've already discussed this, but like how long have these people been alive? Because We talked about this the first episode, but it's really weird, the timeline, and I think it's supposed to feel surreal. This whole section feels very surreal.
Yeah.
Because Kai arrives inside and immediately finds the info dump machine. And that's why I bring this up, because this thing is like decayed and falling apart. And he ends up pulling out some wires and kind of sticking it back together. And Wist is on this recording. And she says that the other planets were all at war. So they were all at this trade war. And they released these worms onto the garbage planet as a form of attack.
Like biological warfare.
Like biological warfare, but big. I'm not sure sentient brain worms are the best option for attack.
Okay, what do you think about this? The worms have been like noted as a parasite in different places, and they just know that it like spreads quickly, but they've always had an effective treatment against it getting too far.
Yeah, blowing up the planet.
And on this trash planet, the infestation has gotten farther along than anybody's ever seen in recorded history, and so they don't know that it turns into a giant like mother brain worm thing.
That's possible. But I mean, there's like 50 people on this planet. I'm not sure why it constituted why it needed to be a place that was attacked.
There's 50 people on this planet right now.
Mm.
But there could have been tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of like refugees on this planet
At one time.
And they've all just been consumed for Pattern.
Yeah. Plus, it must have been some sort of military outpost, poist, because she calls him Commander Bog.
Mm-hmm.
She says Commander Bog is putting together
I think they implied that he was the commander of a space vessel, and it crashed on this planet.
Did they imply that?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
Okay.
But I'll believe you.
Right, but that's why he was commander.
Well, Wist says that the queen scanned her, and she doesn't know why, just like it scanned Zev. And you're like, oh, no, that was actually significant. I kind of forgot it happened, but it's fine.
Bury the lead.
Yeah, and she says there's just a few hundred workers here, so it wasn't a significant target.
Yeah.
So they just passively attacked it, like releasing smallpox-filled blankets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Wist on the recording says, like, I'm probably not alive now, but it's okay. Because everything dies sometimes. Sometime. Everything dies sometime.
Sometime.
Not sometimes, not like, everything dies like occasionally. Like everything dies sometime.
You can't live all the time.
My favorite part about this is Kai first squats in front of this, then he gets it fixed, and then he scoots a little stool over so he has a more comfortable spot to sit while he watches the video. Because he gets up from the stool because Wist walks in and she's wearing a different outfit. And she's immediately like, do you like me? Which worked on Stanley. But Kai is like, so there's a miniseries called The 10th Kingdom, and there's a character named Wolf, and he's the only one who knows the rules of the world. And so he's the only one who keeps everybody alive.
Right.
Like, he gets separated from the party, and almost immediately everybody almost dies. And that's exactly what happens with Kai. But she tries to pull a, do you like me? On Kai. And Kai goes, the dead do not have likes. Just the best shutdown argument for everything. The dead don't do that.
Yeah.
Kai, do you have to go to the bathroom? The dead do not shit. And
the proto-blood takes care of that.
It just whisks away.
He just breathes it out as vapor.
Like vampires that have no excretions. It's fine. So Wist goes, it's okay. Everything dies.
Except for Kai.
Except for Kai. I mean, it's ironic that she says that to Kai. And then she says, did you learn anything of interest? Talking about the info dump machine. And he goes, some things. And she tries the, do you want to kiss me? And he goes, as much as I want to kiss anything, which is not a yes or a no.
The dead do not want to kiss.
He doesn't say that. He just says, as much as I want to kiss anything. I don't know. Kai could want to make out with that wall.
Is Kai like Pan? Is he?
Sure. Any man that walks that way. I know. That was terrible. That was a bad one. So she kisses him. She more or less attacks his face because that was actually kind of a no. It just was a polite no.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. She's like, it didn't work. And he's like, yeah, that's because I'm dead. Everything dies. Right? And then she goes on to say, because she's like, well, we can actually have a conversation, I guess, because I can't take you over. So
She doesn't know what to do with him.
I
So
don't
she
know.
makes a friend.
yeah, she's like, this planet is not delicious anymore. How can you be stopped? And Kai's like, well, time will stop me. Not as much as it stops everything, I guess. And then he hits her with the caw-caw.
The dead do not stop.
He's like, "Caw." And worms start falling out of her midsection, which is our first, oh, Whist is just made of worms.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then another Whist crawls out of the tunnel and is like, do you like me? And so he caw-caws her too. And then we cut away. So he's getting overwhelmed by Whist copies. Well, Bog
He's-
is...
Wistful. That room is wistful.
That was so bad. You know what? I feel like,
They're just upset they didn't come up with that.
I mean, it feels on brand. It's fine. So then Bog is back at the pattern machine and he's like, this is the first fresh body that we've had in forever. And you decide to mix it with Snick?
God damn it.
God damn you,
You
son.
heathens.
Don't you know
You
this?
amateurs.
So they take Zev out and hang her up on this rack. She spends a lot of time tied up in unusual positions in this filming. She's just been very sore. And then he tells Gralek and Bork is the other guy's name, that he's disappointed. He's disappointed. And then he's like,
He's not disappointed
No way.
in their initiative. He's disappointed in their execution.
the actual line he says is, kisses can as kiss kiss can. I didgeridoo. Because he's kind of, yeah. I mean, it's fine. Because he's kind of talking to Zev. And Zev is like, I can give you anything you want. I could kiss you. This body is perfect. And you could have that. Like, you could hit this if you want to, if you let me go.
Mhm.
And then she licks him after he gives the stunning line, the kisses can as kiss kiss can. I didgeridoo. And then she licks him and asks to be let go and says that, you know, we could get together. And Bog goes, oh, I like riding ponies. And Zev goes, oh, I can take you anywhere. Like, oh, you like a ride? We could ride together. And Bog says, and this is the line that really pulls everything together. And he had to really stick this landing because it sets what the actual stakes are is, can you take me home?
Right. Like, underneath it all, what is Bog's deepest desire?
Is to just go home. And you think about it, this is a trash planet. These is not a home. This is a factory.
Right.
They are living in
This is a
it.
workplace.
This is a workplace. These men are probably from the planets that were exploded.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to work one day and then never got to go home. And not only that, but they were immediately infested by this worm. And since we know from Stanley, it completely overrides your own impulses, but you're still in there because as soon as the worm pops out, he's like, it's controlling me.
Right, like
I
he's
can't.
panicking.
Yeah. So inside every one of these men is somebody screaming and has been for who knows how long. And there's no way they can get out of it because there's no place they can go. They don't have a ship to get off. And even if they could, home is gone.
Right.
That is dark as shit. I don't care how, I mean, the whole leg cutting off thing, that's dark. But when you really reel it back to like, these guys went to work and then
The real horror is that
they've been
their entire
trapped.
world is gone.
Everything is gone and there's no one to save them. Yeah.
What is it? They're trapped in skin that does not fit.
Yeah, they're in a universe they don't like and flesh that doesn't fit. Thank you, Dune. And Whist interrupts. She's like, you are home, Bog. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, I am. Yep, you're right, yeah. Because the whole point is that she has to keep them
in the game.
Keep them in the game. Because the
Keep them in
game
the
is
chase.
the point.
The rat race.
Yeah. Kind of like that robot that's constantly sweeping up its own fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look it up. And then Stan tells Whist who Zev is. Because she's like, who is this? And Stanley's like, oh, she's in my crew. And Zev doesn't really understand that Stan isn't himself right now.
She pays him so little attention that she doesn't notice the difference.
I know. She's like, Stanley, come on. And he's like, ah. And she's like, oh, God, he's in another one of his moods again. Like it's
Now's not the time, Stanley.
Yeah. Because Stanley's like, oh, we all know her. That's Zev. Are you going to kiss her? And Whist is like, no, I'm not going to kiss her. She's going to be Pattern. And
women make better pattern than men.
Maybe. We do have a lot more, just kidding. A lot more nerve tissue. So then Bog makes Pattern from some of the brains. He takes Snick out. He takes everything out, including 790. And then he tosses like 3 brains in there and they hang the rest on the rack and they're like, oh no.
Yeah, all the DPs are despairing.
I know. But Kai knocks on the door as they're making brain Pattern. And because of course, all roads lead to this specific room. It's a giant thing. He came in from a completely different entrance from everybody else, but he ends up in this room. Mm-hmm. And they open the hatch to see him standing there. And the one guy goes, well, when it rains, it pours, because they had no fresh bodies. And now they are overwhelmed with fresh bodies.
Right.
So they pull this lever and it just like a door slides down behind him. And then he gets decapitated again.
Because
for the 3rd time, but not for the last time.
It had not happened yet in this episode. So.
Yeah. I mean, if this poor actor didn't have to wear a suit that made him look like he didn't have a head, would it even be a Lexx episode? No. And they put some more brains. They make Pattern. And they set Kai's head on this rack because his head falls in and then his body stays outside the door.
Yeah.
And so they pick his head up and they just set it on the rack with all the other brains. And then Bog starts to explain that there's an art to Pattern, that every piece of meat is different, a different personality, a different scent of soul. Is it slowly consuming their souls? Is that what we're trying to say?
I think that's just wordplay.
Okay. You think he's just being enigmatic?
Yeah, he's enigmatically poetic.
Right. Well, he makes enough Pattern that they all get to have Pattern on the house. Nobody has to play the stupid game.
Right.
Or rather let their worms eat Pattern, which I like that Bog's worm has its own little, like, tube thing that it comes out of.
Yeah.
Because he lifts it with a pair of tongs and sticks its head in the...
I think the implication there is that his worm is old.
Could be. I mean, she could have re-upped him. But maybe each worm has a different personality and she could have lost his knowledge by taking the worm out. It doesn't matter. What happens is all these men start having orgasms all over the room because they're like, and it's a lot. We even zoom in on Rutger Hauer going like, oh. And then he burps. He's like, that's good Pattern. It's a lot. It's a lot. But they won't let Stanley have any Pattern because he's the captain. They need him. They need him all together. Like they need his brain together. And so they're all dancing around drunk. And they kind of remember that Kai's body is in this like antechamber. And they're like, let him in. We can make some more Pattern. And so they open the door and his head starts talking to them immediately because Bog picks it up and he starts giving him cooking instructions. He's like, why don't you make a roux? And you're like, Kai, what are you doing? You know what? Kai's had 2,000 years to shit talk people before he killed them.
Right. And he's just orders of magnitude above them.
He's said it all.
Witticisms.
So he just has to come up with, maybe he challenges himself to come up with new shit every single time. He's like, I can't reuse material. That's amateur. I need to come up with new stuff. He's like, introduce me in slices once they've formed a roux. Because he's like, chop my head up, throw it in there. And Bog is like, oh, God, I've never had the heads talk back. So he tosses the head, like, ugh. And just immediately is like, okay, well, if that's too fucking weird. Can I go to the hole? And Whist is like, oh yeah, you can go to the hole. And all the men are like, hole, hole, hole.
Which, not wrong.
Like, I love the hole.
Can I go in the hole?
Whist is like, all right,
Please.
fine, you can go in the hole. Yay!
I was worried it was going to be sexual.
Oh, you were worried it was going to be sexual. Heaven forbid that all these men were going to like jizz pattern into the hole.
Oh, I didn't know they were going to like
It's
squirt
okay.
pattern out.
Okay, well, their worms do. Their
Yeah.
worms release the pattern into the hole, so it's fine. So Whist picks up Kai's head, and Zev is like struggling over on the rack, but his body can actually. He must have some killer proprioception, like his awareness of his body in space,
Right.
because he's able to use his like caw to hit Whist and knock the head out of her hands.
It's like in Dune when Paul sees through Leto's eyes to throw the knife.
Whose eyes is he seeing through?
His own, but his head's in a different place.
Right. Well, somehow he is able to aim his weapon. Somehow Palpatine survived. It doesn't really matter. It hits Whist. She drops the head. He picks up his own head and puts it back on his body. And it just reattaches because that's how it works.
It's like in the first Resident Evil game where you have lots of third person camera views of rooms,
Yeah.
and you still have to have your character aim the gun at the zombies.
Yeah.
So you can never do first person aiming in Resident Evil. It's always third person aiming.
So you know how hard this is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, respect, I guess. Kai's had 2,000 years to figure it out. Maybe he can echolocate. That's why he's talking. Maybe he's talking so much. He's like, oh,
yeah.
I'm over there. And then Whist gets probably the worst line of the series so far. She's like, the game is to feed. Would you deny me a future? What?
I
No,
thought that made sense. We're all just trying to survive.
It just
I'm
feels-
just surviving in competition with
It feels
you.
out of the blue. Like, what? He didn't say anything. He just reconnected his head. Although I guess she would remember that he's been like, maybe he killed like 150 of them. That room is just full of Whist bodies.
Okay, so the line makes sense in the episode.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it is out of the blue.
It is out of the blue. Because Kai is immediately like, hell yeah, I would deny you a future. And then she just goes, you are not relevant. So she has 3 lines that, in the context of the entire episode, make a lot of sense. In the context of that specific moment, none at all.
Like, did they cut pieces out of this scene? Did they cut out like Kai dialogue or somebody else's dialogue that she's responding to?
I think they just had to pack in a couple of lines here, and they did, because we reference most of these again.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have a way to organically work them in. So they're just like, bloop, we're just going to drop these in
Bolted
here.
on,
It's
yeah.
fine. And she attempts to flee, but Kai cuts off her head. So
Oops. You
Oops.
dropped something there.
she doesn't get to reattach her head, unfortunately. And all the men are gathered around this giant hole, which is actually just a hole. Lame. And they all lie down with their heads over the edge as their worms pop out and start vomiting pattern down into the hole. And like the ones we can see, like Boggs, it's just like squirting a little bit. And then you look behind him and it's like somebody turned on a hose. And it's just, I don't know what this glowing liquid is, but they had to make a shit ton of it.
Oh, it's green fluorescent protein.
Okay. Well, they had to make a shit ton of it. Hopefully it wasn't toxic
It's not toxic.
in the 90s. Who knows? It kind of reminds me of, I feel like it kind of reminds me of is a t-shirt somebody needs to make me. Kind of reminds me of this time we let our daughter go to sleep with some glow sticks, like take some glow sticks to bed, and she chewed the glow sticks in half and then got glow stick shit all over herself and all over her hand and all over her bed.
So she walked into our
So
bedroom.
she walked into our bedroom and she just stuck a glowing hand in my face and was like, Mama,
I'm glowing.
I'm glowing. And I was like, oh my God.
I've
Side
never been
note,
happier this stuff is non-toxic.
side note, that shit stinks. It
It
stinks
smells.
so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's non-toxic, but it is filled with glass shards because there's the little tiny
Yeah.
glass. Oh my God. I don't know, kids. Anyway, the men are gathered around the hole. They're vomiting the shit into it. There we go. So by we need to feed, the queen meant you need to feed me before we leave. So then Kai unties Zev and gets her down. And Zev is like, Zev, really focused on the issue of the moment, is like, Kai, you're not dead. I thought you were dead. And he's like, well, I mean, technically I am still dead, but I am now currently mobile again.
Because Kai cares.
Well, he's like, yeah, he cares. She's hanging up. This poor actress. She finally gets to do stuff again. She's restrained for half the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then she tells him, like, we thought you were gone. We buried you. We had a really bad funeral. You should have heard what Stanley said. Actually, Stanley just thanked him for all the stuff he did.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Stanley's just not very eloquent.
Yeah. And Kai's like, well, I mean, I kind of was dead. Like, you weren't wrong. But the worms revived me with an enzyme. An enzyme.
Yeah.
So here might be a good moment where we keep some of these worms for whatever enzyme they used to bring him back, because clearly it worked.
I guess in my head, the reason the worms stuff woke him up is because his body or the proto blood saw it as something trying to, like, something invasive and responded.
Oh, maybe. Well, he says they revived him with an enzyme, which implies that these worms have the ability to bring back recently deceased people. Because they possess an enzyme capable of reviving people.
Yeah.
And we're just like, that's just a throw it out. Well, whatever. Yeah, no, the worms brought me back to life. Oh, okay, good. Cool, let's go finish doing what we were doing and kill all the worms. To see if he was a suitable host, but it turned out he wasn't, like, alive. So they were like, man,
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
and
He's
poor Kai,
decarbonized.
he looks really bummed. Like, man, even the worms didn't choose me. Did you want to be possessed? I don't know. I didn't even get the option. So they go to the hole and they see all the men feeding the queen, which they're all like, ugh. And then at this point, yeah, Kai and Zev are like, well, what the fuck? Actually, Zev is more what the fuck. Kai's like, as expected. Like, so basically he implies these are all a hive mind. And so,
Yeah, they're all connected in some way. And my take on it was that the worms are not themselves like a sustainable biological entity.
no, they are an extension of the queen.
Yeah, they're just a thing that's produced by the queen, and they don't go off and reproduce on their own.
Right.
They just go out to get resources to bring back.
Right. And Zev, it is so hard. I'm just going to call them both Kev, because trying to remember Kai and Zev, I don't know why that's so hard for me. But Zev is like, what does it want? Like, what is all this about? What is happening? What are the motivations? Walk me through the motivations. And Kai is just like, I don't know, a new opportunity to eat. It needs to go grocery shopping. It almost ate all the food in its fridge. Like, look there's like 10 people left. And then the worms start killing their hosts, like they killed Snick.
Right.
Yeah. And Bog wakes up just long enough to look at Kai and be like, well, who are you? And he's like, the guy whose head, I don't know what I'm the guy. I'm Kai.
I'm the dead.
Yeah. And then Bog goes, is it over? And Kai's like, yeah, it's over. I think you've entered the final stage, which means the worm's about to eat your brain. And Bog is like, yeah, I can feel that. The
queen's ready to move to the next stage, and so she doesn't need the worms anymore.
They're probably just so tired.
Oh,
And
the people, yeah.
He's
absolutely.
been murdering his friends for years and then drinking a fluid made from their bodies.
Yeah.
It's got to be like, am I done? Am I finished? Yeah. Okay. Thank God. And Bog dies. He says the circle is complete. And then Kai is like, well, there's really only one course of action from here. So Kai yeets himself into the hole.
Because
I mean,
he's
the
already
queen is down
dead.
there. Yeah, I mean, that's his job. It's like kind of like Murderbot to throw itself against the enemy and take
Ooh,
more.
that's a nice parallel.
Yeah, and hope that you kill the thing before you take so much damage you're no longer functional.
Or have it be worth it that you get destroyed.
Yeah, because then you
as long
save
as
your
you win.
crew, your
Yeah.
clients. He's a bit like my. All right, now it makes a lot more sense about why I like Kai. He's Murderbot. He's dry, and has a cubicle that he goes into to hang out and like repair
And he
himself.
doesn't like to hang out or just chat with anybody, but he cares about them and he takes care of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, he's proto Murderbot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, ostensibly he does this to save Stan. Doesn't specifically care about killing the queen, but killing the queen is the only way to get the worm in Stan's head out of Stan's head. And it might be that he cares about Stan, and it also might be a little bit that Stan's the only one who can fly the Lexx.
Yeah, I think the only reason Kai cares about Stan
And
is because
Zev needs the Lexx,
Yeah.
and so he likes Zev, so by extension, he has to care about Stanley. So after all that, Zev is left to herself, and she has to kind of wrap up and get back to the Lexx all by herself. So the party is split again.
Well, where's Stan at this point?
He has. Stan is with her, but he's not.
He's not himself.
He's
right
not
now.
himself, no. And so the first thing they do is collect the divine predecessors. Like, why? Why? These are the bad guy. Well, whatever. They put him in the bag. They're going to take him
save
back.
them.
And they're like, thank you. We cherish you. We will help you in all of your endeavors. And Zev is like, the fuck you will. She's like, oh, yeah, I believe everything you're saying.
Well, I guess if you are as lonely as Zev,
They do have a lot of knowledge.
they have a lot of knowledge, and they are at least other things to talk to that
Yeah. And
are
they're
not
they're-
both other minds on the ship other than the ship itself that are always around are both trying to fuck her all the time. And so here are at least some things she can have conversations with, or even just like listen to, just to not feel so lonely, that are not trying to get inside of her.
Yeah. And they're basically ineffective. I mean, they're just brains in boxes. So they
Right.
can't really, except for when they convince Jiggerada to help them.
Right.
Without Jiggerada's help, they couldn't have done anything. So the risk of keeping them around is minimal. And they do know a lot of shit. And I don't know, whatever. They're attached to them for some reason. So they bring them back. And we cut to Kai, who is walking through probably one of the weirdest sets. It's like,
And the bar is pretty high on this show.
yeah. Anyway, it's weird. And then the queen is talking to him. She's like, when I was little, I had to do all kinds of things to survive. I don't even remember where I came from, but it's okay. Everything dies because the queen knows this is it for her. And then she says, that's why we have daughters. And then we go through the sequence where a couple of giant ass women appear. One of them is Zev, and he has to kill giant Zev, which I think it would have been better off making her regular sized. Like, oh, look, it's Zev, because then it would have been like, oh no, is it Zev? Can I kill her? But making her like the 30-foot tall woman, Kai is obviously like, oh, you copied Zev. Oh, okay, I'm going to kill her. So he kills her. That's not a problem. But then giant Whist appears, and he's like found Whist's body, which is like long dead. A lot happens down here, but this whole sequence is really kind of, I mean, you're a little exhausted at this point. Most of the characters have died. You're just trying to get back to the Lexx. They collect 790. Stan and Zev fly off in the Moth. Kai is trying to kill giant women with his tiny little weapon.
Weapon.
It's infinite length. Yes, it's an infinite length. Could he not wrap it around the thing's neck?
I think it's supposed to be rigid. Because he, like, when he shoots it,
Yeah.
he can just lift it.
Okay. But like sometimes it curves.
I don't know.
Okay. Sometimes it flies away and comes back and doesn't have a connecting tether. I don't know. How's this? I feel like it works any way they want it to work in that
It's a plot
episode.
device.
So I don't know. It's fine.
It's a device to make plot
He just
happen.
kind of stabs her in the chest with it, but it's sort of like getting stung. Like, ouch, ow, God, you stuck a toothpick in my forehead. That didn't hurt at all. It doesn't matter.
And who's to say the giant Zev actually died?
Oh, that's true.
Because
But we blow the planet up.
right, it just looks humanoid on the outside,
Yeah.
but it has like worms and stuff, tendrils inside.
Yeah.
So he may have just incapacitated the giant Zev.
Yeah. Well, Giant Whist gets up and walks away as the queen is like, you wouldn't kill me. And he's like, everything dies. We've said it enough in this episode. It feels like, oh, what's one more? But Giant Whist just walks away and he's like, oh, no. So now he's got to get to the Lexx, which he somehow does. Oh, he gets on it as it's flying by. That's why he can catch up with it. Because Zev and Stan moth back to the Lexx. And then Zev is putting the brains back in the brain room. Like,
Priority task.
I mean, sure. They would have lived in the bag too, so who cares? And this is when they're like, your every wish will be our command. And she's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I really believe that. And Stanley, who has just been standing there placidly, actually dips and steals the moth. And she's like, no, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Right?
Who would have known that bringing the hive mind worm to the ship that can take off and take the worm out into space where it can find more food would backfire? Oh my God. Who could have guessed that this thing would happen? But he goes back to the cockpit and he ends up telling the Lexx to lift off. And the Lexx is like, I'm only at 93%. And Stanley's like, no, come on, let's do this. Like 93% is good. 93% is basically 100. It's no problem. Let's go. And
Close
so
enough.
the Lexx does take off. The Lexx needs 2-factor authentication. Like not just the hand and the voice, which I guess is 2-factor, but also like, are you under the control of someone? Like, are you being coerced?
Right. That's the weakness.
Yeah, because someone could just force him to do a thing and he'd have to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Lexx needs like are you doing this willingly or are you being controlled by a worm?
But even there's a line because like, yeah, somebody could be holding a gun to Zev's head and say, fly the Lexx away or I'll shoot Zev. And then the Lexx could say, oh, no, you're being coerced. Or like Kai, Zev, and Stan could be all deciding cooperatively, like by committee, what to do. And then Kai and Zev are like, okay, we're going to go do this. This is what we need to do. And Stan's like, I don't want to, but you're making me. And then does the Lexx let him do that or not?
Well, it's still, we could go with like when the brains were able to copy his voice. Like that feels like a line we could have been like, no.
Yeah, that could have been caught.
Yeah. And then, hey, I think maybe he gets scanned when you go into the like thing he has to stand on. And they're like, oh, you appear to have a brain worm. You may want to take care of that.
Or like in Blade Runner 2049, where they have to go back and like do this assessment where they repeat the word and get like emotion scanned.
Yeah.
Where you do this like challenge response thing to make sure that they're still the same person, like mentally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a space, although it's a weirdly primitive space-faring civilization.
Right, because it's organic.
Because it's all organic. And
well,
then
this ship is organic.
Well, it's all
but
like
the other
brutal is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not it's not like a Star Trek where we figured out how to cure all disease. We're just like, oh, you're diseased to the protein bank. It's like like we got space travel and we were like, great, and then never advanced like morally or psychologically beyond that. We were just like, we're like cavemen in space in this.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you operate under a tyranny for 2,000 years.
All you need to do is connect 790 up to the Lexx, because the 790 clocks in immediately. He's like, there's something really strange, stranger than usual about the waste of protein, meaning Stanley.
Yeah.
And at this point, Zev has joined Stanley on the bridge, and she's like, Stanley, we can't leave without Kai. We got to wait for Kai. And Stanley punches her in the face. And the funniest part about this is 790, because he goes, ah! Just starts screaming. Because Stanley finally hurt his woman and he can't do anything. He's just a head. And Stanley gets to deliver the line, there's so many delicious planets out there with food on the surface that are dark, wet, and rich inside. Okay. And so as he's flying by, he flies over Giant Whist, and Giant Whist just reaches up and like Spider-Man's to the outside of the Lexx.
Yep.
And she ends up clinging to the outside of Lex's eye, one of the big dragonfly eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kai is like, oh, hell no. So then he caw-caws up to the... I'm just going to call it a caw-caw because it doesn't have a name.
Right, yeah, we've never... Maybe later, like, somebody's going to ask him, what's that thing on your arm?
And he's just going to go, caw-caw, motherfucker. But he caw-caws up to, with this caw-caw of infinite length, up to the spaceship. And meanwhile, like, he's clinging to the outside of the spaceship. Whist is clinging to the outside of the spaceship. So we're about to establish that Kai can survive a vacuum, which is fine. He's decarbonized.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point, right?
He ain't bothered.
So Whist burrows into the Lexx, and Lexx is like...
Yeah, like a tendril.
Yeah, Lexx goes, distress. I'm being penetrated.
Which is totally on brand.
I mean... It's not incorrect. The Lexx is in fact being penetrated. But
penetrated is the right word for this show to use.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And Stanley goes, Mama's home. So this is when Zev gets to punch Stanley back.
Yeah.
And says he's no match for her and they aren't leaving without Kai. But then Stanley's worm comes out and she has like a boxing match with his worm. Like, instead of just punching Stanley again and knocking Stanley out, she's like trying to punch the worm, and the worm is like, dodge. And she's like, God damn it, I can't hit the worm. And it's just this worm on a wire.
It's such a shift in vibe.
Yes, because it's like, oh no, the worm. And she could have just gone, dick punch, and like punched him in the dick, and he would have gone down, and it would have been no problem. But instead, she's like, no, not the worm. And she ends up punching the worm in the face. And it like whips around the back of Stanley's neck, which is a pretty big accomplishment because this is clearly like a foam worm on a wire that has like it's like bobs up and down, and Stanley's like, haha, you'll never defeat my worm. And like to the bouncing side. It's so weird. But the Lexx continues to protest. He's like, help, Stanley, help. There's a thing outside of me and it's stuck a tendril on me. And Whist sends this weird tendril thing out of her mouth and into the Lexx. So the rest of the time when we see Whist on the outside, she has
her mouth sucked to the Lexx.
She has her mouth open, and there is it's not a great visual. It's like weirdly sexual, but not at the same time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's this show.
That's the whole point. But just as
it's like
Zev is really
sexual, but not erotic.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, not.
And I'd say that's a big vibe for this show.
Yeah. Sexual, but not erotic. Exactly. But just as Zev manages to punch Stanley's worm, like get the upper hand over Stanley's worm, this giant tendril shows up and it's got Whist's head in it. And it's like just this terrible CG face.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes, do you like me? Which is an interesting reuse of that line and is really creepy and effective. And then it proceeds to chase Zev all around the Lexx because it is also of infinite length. While Kai fights the queen on the outside. And poor Lexx is like, Stanley, something is biting me. And it hurts a lot. And then poor 790, who is really, as the kids would say, OP. I mean, if you can get Stanley, if you can get 790 to a terminal of some kind, he has an infinite number of functions. He could figure this out. So they just yeet him off the side.
That's the value of having a human brain, because human brains are general problem solvers.
Yeah.
And you're a general problem solver with vast amounts of information and processing capacity.
Right. So that's why he's OP. So
that's why he does not have a body, because he would be unstoppable.
Right. So they yeet him over the side. So he goes back into the Lexx bog.
So I've been waiting for Stanley to quip back to 790 with the best line to use against 790, which is, why don't you quit while you're ahead?
No.
And I expected that here.
No. He does start arguing back with 790 in the next episode. Yeah. Because there's a part where, I mean, everybody goes a little hard on Stanley in the next episode. And so Stanley finally fights back.
Yeah. He needed to be provoked.
Yeah.
Inspired to
he needed to finally
grow.
be fucking fed up.
Yeah.
I think, did we already discuss this on here, that Stanley is a terminal optimist and that his trust is his biggest weakness? Yeah. And the fact that he's really just a guy who really just wants everyone to be okay and get along. And he's jaded and over it. And he doesn't always quit back because it's like he's just tired. And so finally he's over it in the next episode. But it's got to feel good that 790 is constantly getting yeeted over into Lex's digestive system or whatever is happening at the bottom here where it lands in Bogland.
Right.
And
where's the gravity coming from?
It's fine. From the Lexness. So on the outside, Whist is still biting it because this scene is so long. And Lexx goes, Stanley, I want it off of me. You get it off. Then we go back out and Kai is fighting. And really the most important part of this, honestly, I mean, he caws a bunch and stuff happens. But the most important part is that his hair does not react to zero gravity.
His hair is always subject to zero gravity. That's why his proto blood runs out so fast.
Oh, because it's trying to sustain the beehive. Like not only does the beehive remain in place, but the one like framing bang that he has, the lock stays down along his face, even as he's upside down on the Lex's eyeball. Never a hair out of place.
Never.
Lexx ends up turning around and destroying the planet. I mean, Lexx ends up saving the day because everybody is ineffectively doing shit.
So Kai cuts the tendril, right?
No.
From Whist?
He just stabs it in the head and he ends up getting knocked off and he's floating in space. And Zev is running away from the tentacle on the inside. And then Lexx is like, ow, why is nobody helping me? So it turns around and destroys the planet without Stanley asking it to destroy the planet.
Well, we established early in this episode that the Lexx will act autonomously for its own self-preservation.
Right. Well, you know what's terrifying is this ship will blow up planets on its own.
Right. Without
having to have a direct permission. Because it throws a little temper tantrum and it blows up Klagia. Which means it's capable of pretty much anything if it's pissed off.
Well, the first time it went through the fractal core, it had most of its memory wiped.
Well, I think it can act in its own preservation.
Right, but I'm thinking there was probably a lot of protocols and safeties in place in its kind of operating system.
And those are gone now.
Right. Those are gone now.
I think if Stanley had forbidden it to destroy the planet, it wouldn't have destroyed the planet.
That would have put a new safety rule in place.
But anything
He has not done any of that.
Yeah, anything not expressly prohibited is permitted.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's lucky he does, because the flying debris decapitates giant whist.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, Kai's caw is of infinite length, because he can just goo himself back over to the Lexx, and then he climbs in the hole that Whist left. So I guess atmosphere can't come out of the Lexx.
It's the same way the gravity works.
Yep.
And that's my headcanon.
It just is. However the gravity works, that's also how the atmospheric controls work.
Yep.
And then Kai grabs 790 somewhere and slaps Stanley awake and goes, "Wake up, living man." Nobody ever calls Stanley by his name. Waste of skin man. Waste of protein, living man. Poor Stanley. Tweedledee-dum. Yeah. And then Kai shows Stan the worm that had come out of his neck. He pulls it out. And it's now dead. And he's like, "This part was in your brain. Isn't that neat?"
Yeah.
Isn't that neat? And Stanley goes, "Can I get sick now?"
Poor Stanley.
And then we go back and they're eating in the hairy food room. And Stanley gets shot.
Oh, he's
ordering
ordering
a bunch of stuff. And he ends up getting shot with Lexx slurry. It's the only way I can describe it.
But he's not upset about it. It must taste good.
Yeah. Well, Zev laughs and Kai is just sitting there watching. He could be amused, but he may not be making a facial expression.
That would be very Murderbot of him.
Yeah, it would be very Murderbot of him. And that's the end of the episode. Is like, haha, guys, all of that. We finally got food again. Isn't that great?
They're back on the Lexx. All the same people are still there, alive. All the same characters are still there and functional. But now the Lex's fuel tank is full.
And I'm sure that there will be no consequences from having been boarded by a giant hive mind worm thing.
No. It will never be mentioned again.
No. It's fine. I bet the Lexx heals. That would be really helpful.
Well, yeah, it's alive. It grows.
Yeah.
If it grows, it heals.
Wonder if it has to use its food reserves.
Mm-hmm. You are what you eat.
So then they're going to have to eat
that
again.
That means the Lexx is human flesh.
And trash. Whatever the trash was.
I mean, it was...
Yeah, oh no, I know.
Fed by the protein bank on the cluster, yeah.
Which in the next episode, we finally answered my question. Because it's feeding them, it is being fed protein in plastic bags. Does it also eat the plastic bags?
Sure.
And in the next episode, it says it's capable of filtering out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That it just, everything it puts in its mouth doesn't get eaten. It can kind of be like this, not this. Although maybe the plastic parts of Lexx are made of the plastic it ate. And the protein parts are made of the protein it ate.
Yeah, if you can break down the plastic. Maybe it's mushroom plastic. Or soy plastic.
Let's go with it. Sure. I'm sure in the future we've figured out a plastic that biodegrades.
On command.
In the belly of a giant living spaceship. And that's the end of the third episode of Lexx. And we only have one more episode left in the first season. Movie called Giga Shadow. Matt, would you like to read the what's happening next week on an all new exciting episode of the Dead Do Not podcast?
Next week on the Dead Do Not podcast, the cleansing of the cluster is complete and the birth of the Giga Shadow is progressing. These events are unknown to the crew of the Lexx when they decide to journey to the cluster for one last attempt to get the proto-blood Kai needs to continue his existence.
So until then, I worship his shadow.
May his shadow fall upon you.
Until next time, friends.
Bye.